Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here with another Positively Penny Black video where we're trying our best to do our part to bring you moments of peace, distraction, and crafty fun during these uncertain times we currently find ourselves in. And in today's video, I will be using a gem of a stamp. This is our cling stamp called Alluring Arrangement. And what I really love about this stamp is just with one image, you have your entire beautiful scene ready to go. So here is the card that I've created. It's a simple one-layer card on a 5x7 watercolor panel. And my inspiration for this card, it came from this gorgeous card by Mila. I just felt like her coloring and her inking around the edges and just her color choices were so peaceful yet also springy to me. And so I have used her card as the main inspiration for mine. So I looked at her colors and her design and used that in creating my card as well. So to begin, I went ahead and stamped that image, Alluring Arrangement, onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, and I'm going to first paint this using my Distress Ink re-inkers used as watercolors. So I just put a little dot of the re-inker ink onto a palette, and then I pick it up with my paintbrush, mix in a little bit of water, and paint it onto the image. And I find by stamping this in Memento Toffee Crunch ink and using the Distress Ink re-inkers as watercolors, the stamping actually seems to take on the color of the ink that goes over the top of it. And so it is sort of a cheater, easy way to do some no-line watercoloring. Now for these flowers down here, I am just painting them with a picked raspberry Distress Ink re-inker. I'm not worried about doing any shading or anything with these in particular. I will be going back and doing that a little bit later in the video using some Arteza gouache paints. So I'm just putting down sort of just this main color of pink onto these flowers. And I realized there I colored the center of the flower, but I'm able to put some orange right on top of that a little bit later on. Now I will have all of the exact colors, supplies, stamps, paintbrush, paper, inks, everything listed at the very end of the video up on screen. So if you want to take a look at that in more detail, you can just hit pause at that time and check it all out. Now I went ahead and painted the centers of those flowers, and here I am going in and painting these flowers over here on the right hand part of the image. Now for this, you'll see I'm putting down my a darker color, which is mainly only the ink on my paintbrush. Then I dip my paintbrush into water, pat it onto a paper towel, and then go back and blend into that darker color. And this keeps it a darker shade where I first apply that concentrated ink, and then it blends into a lighter color as I work my way up. And the water sort of lets that seep out and blend upward. You will see I am trying to work on petals that are not touching or that are not adjacent to each other, so that that water that I apply doesn't start seeping everywhere and the color doesn't start blending everywhere. And you can use a heat gun to dry this off in between if you're ready to move on to more colors. Now I'll move down and follow that same process down here on the leaves. Sometimes I find that I like to go back and put more concentrated ink if it sort of blends out or lightens up too much when I add the water to that. So you can always go back in and drop more ink in. And as I mentioned earlier, I will be adding more blending and shading using the gouache paints. Now for these very fine stems and details, I am using a Pitt Artist pen, and I'm just coloring those in. This is waterproof, so I can paint over the top of it. And for me, this is just easier for me to keep a steady hand using this than it is with a paintbrush and water. So I used a green, and then I'm also using a black here on these branches. Next, I'm going to go in and start painting the different vases and flower pots. I am going with this blue. I'm going to let it sort of blend right in with that green of those leaves. I'm not too worried about that. It creates a beautiful turquoise color, and I can give it more of a blue look just by going back over the edges with more blue. while that's wet, it just all starts to blend together, which I think is sort of the soft look that I wanted to have, sort of as if you are looking through the glass at it's full of water. I'm going to add a touch of that blue up here on the butterfly as well. And I really love, I never would have picked to color this butterfly green, but I saw that Mila had done that on her inspiration card. And I think that was such a beautiful design choice because it creates a visual triangle from each these leaves here on this vase, the leaves on the right, and then that butterfly up on the top. And that whenever you can create sort of a visual triangle like that with your colors, it's very pleasing to the eye and creates a nice balanced design. So I'm so glad I kept with what Mila had done because I think that that really balanced out the design by having that green pulled up there to the top. Now here I'll go in with some gathered twig distress ink, re-inker, putting that concentrated ink on the right and left sides, then going back with just my wet paintbrush and blending out that edge. You can see how that gives a nice curve to that pot, and I am going back while it's still wet with even more concentrated ink and blending that in just to darken things up. Kind of push and play with where you want that ink to go also while it's still wet. And off camera there, I'm just getting my next color ready, and I will move over here. This is the Weathered Wood Distress Ink Re-Inker, and I'm just adding that here just to give this the look of glass and make it look complete, not just leaving it white. Now I will work on the floor. This stamp makes it so easy to ground these images because of those lines right there that are part of the stamp. I just kind of went over the top of those and I'm now going back to blend them with more water on my brush than ink. And that's what I love about this stamp is that it's just so easy with just one impression to have this very complete looking card with lots of depth because of the different flowers and pots and branches that are included. Next I'm going to use my Arteza gouache paints, and I'm just squeezing these onto a palette. This is a palette, just a cheapo palette I picked up at Walmart, and I like to layer these on top of my watercoloring. So the watercoloring is dry, and you can see here with this palette, once they dry you can re-wet these paints and reuse them. So that's why I do like to put them on a palette. This actually closes up and I can just keep it in my storage area. And I'm going to go in and add some layers here right on top of my watercoloring. Now if I use a lot of water with the gouache paints, they are going to be more transparent and more like a watercolor. The less water I add, then they are going to be more opaque and more like an acrylic. So you can get a lot of different looks with these. And here's where I'm using them to add my shading to these flowers. So I wanted to just make them darker towards the center and lighter as they moved out. And I think this also really softens all of the lines that are part of these flowers because this is a opaque paint. It doesn't completely cover the lines of the illustration, but it softens them, and it also gives the petals sort of a velvety look like flower petals have in real life. So I really love going in. It's a fast way to add shading on these flowers. You don't need to go in and worry about every petal that's on there, just putting the darker color towards the center and making it lighter as it works its way out. I'll just do a couple of these for you here. And you can see I put more concentrated paint down and then wet my brush and go back and blend that with more water. Pick up more concentrated paint, put it down. My brush goes into the water, I pat it on a paper towel, and then I move that color out. Now I'm not aiming for perfection here. I want this to have sort of an artsy, brushstroke quality to it. But you can see how that dynamic color of the gouache paint really brings those flowers to life. And it's very easy to do. Now you could go more detailed and really darken up the flowers, or excuse me, the petals that are behind some of the other petals that are on top, and that would be very beautiful too. I was just going with what I was in the mood for here, which was just focusing on the center of the flower. There's a lot going on this stamp, so it's really not necessary to pay a ton of attention to the details. Here I am just adding a touch of a dark violet color, and it's amazing what just darkening up a little bit goes a long ways, how much more dimension it gives these flowers. You can see just comparing the one on the right to the one on the left, how that darker color really makes a big difference. It's so easy to do with these gouache paints. I apologize there, I'm just a little bit off camera, but I'm just doing the same thing as I did on that first flower, just adding some of that darker paint down into those sort of crevices of those flowers. I'm adding a little bit of orange here to the center of these flowers. You can see it goes right over the top of what we have there already. And you can use water to move that around. Makes it very easy to blend. Here I'm just adding some water and picking up a lighter yellow color, and that I think adds such life to this. If there's one thing you do with your gouache paints, if you need to go back and add some highlights, they are so perfect for that, and they can really bring your images to life just by putting a little touch of that lighter color right on top. Now I'm also going to use some of the gouache sage green color here on the leaves. I think that creates a really beautiful color layered on top of the peeled paint distress ink. I'm adding that also up there on the butterfly so that that ties in to everything as well. So sorry again that that's off camera. Sometimes I just get going and forget that I'm filming and forget to check the viewfinder to make sure that it is on camera. And again, adding that just touches of it here on these leaves so that everything is tied together and has a cohesive look. Now I'm going to add just some highlights here with some white mixed with quite a bit of water, so it's watered down quite a bit here on this pot. Then I go back and can just blend it with more water so I get a nice transition to the watercolors that are underneath with that gouache paint on top. And I'm going to do the same thing down here on the floor. And I like how that just kind of freshens everything up. Also gives it that artistic sort of brush stroke sort of look to it. And that is just using the white, and it picks up the tint of the watercolor below. Once that was all dry, I'm going to use the color of Acorn in Make Art Blendable Dye ink and an ink blending tool and a foam pad. I'm starting off of the edge and working my way on using a circular motion. This was inspired by the inking that Mila had done on her card. So you can see I've picked up the colors, the stamp, and the inking around the outer edge from Mila's card design. And I'm going to stamp the sentiment. This is from our miniature 3 by 4 inch set 30-473 Breathe. It has like a yoga image on it, but I thought it just fit the times and fit the reminder that we all need right now is to just breathe. So I stamped that there at the top, and this 5 by 7 card is ready to be mounted to a note card. So here is a look at close-up at some of that painting and at the finished card. I thank you all for watching, and I thank Mila for the inspiration. We here at Penny Black are really committed to helping bring you all positive messages of inspiration, hope, art, craft, and sharing. And we invite you to fill your feeds on your phones and your iPads and your computers with our Facebook and Instagram and blog posts, which we are loading with beauty, flowers, critters, and all things happy. And I will link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below, along with links to the stamps used today and Mila's beautiful card. And if you stay tuned, you will see that list pop up on screen of all of the supplies used in creating this card. Thanks so much for watching.